when you use the internet sort of so aggressively and so widely that it takes away other forms of communication that need to happen, now it's causing a problem. There are other ways out of the political realm to understand it. Imagine there's a chess club in Greece, someplace in Athens. So there's a chess club in Athens. It's a social engaging place. People go there, etc. That kind of place matters. It enables people to communicate and talk with each other. It doesn't have to be chess. It could be anything. Now along comes the internet. So now all of a sudden you can play chess with anybody all over the world online like that. So what happens? People still like the chess club and the social involvement, but 10 or 20% of the people who used to go to the chess club start to go elsewhere, start to play online, or 25%. The rest still want to use the chess club plus the internet. But the amount that the internet diminishes the activity at the chess club cuts into the chess club revenues, the chess club closes. You see the dynamic. So what you can have is a kind of imperialism where the internet is so effective in many ways that it can close off other things that should exist. Take Amazon to Amazon.
Yes.
Amazon is an incredibly valuable resource in many senses. Because why? Well, you live in someplace in the U.S. way outside of a major city, right? There are no good bookstores. But you can go online and in a day or two get almost anything. That's incredibly valuable from the point of view of the distribution of information to people who want it. On the other hand, because of the extent to which people start to utilize that tool, the stores get reduced revenues and the stores close. And pretty soon what you have is this as your mechanism of getting books. Is that bad? Well, yes and no. You can't browse. You can't socialize in the stores. And if Amazon ever cuts back the lists, there's nothing you can do about it. Right? So that's an example. So now go to organizing. If you can send, when you used to want to communicate with the 2,000 students or the 10,000 students on campus, you would sit up all night using a mimeograph machine, right? Creating a flyer. Then that flyer, covered in ink, then that flyer you would take and you would put it under everybody's door. And then the next night you'd knock on the doors, and for night after night after night for months, and talk to people. Okay, now what you do is you write an email and you push a button, and it goes out. Now that's not entirely bad by any means. I can send emails to 100,000 people at a time. It takes 10 minutes, right? How could I possibly communicate with 100? Now, not everybody has 100,000 email addresses at their disposal, but still, if you're an organizer on a campus, you have lists of people. Or if you're an organizer in a community, you may have lists of people, and that's positive. But if you do it to the exclusion of personal communication, right? So it's a blast to many people, which is not oriented to the personal views of a particular person. Now it starts to have a negative as well as a positive. Ask yourself, how does fundamentalism grow? How does the religious fundamentalism that has grown, whether we're talking about, say, Pakistan or the United States, and those are the two, right? In other words, there's Muslim fundamentalism in the world, and then there's the brand of fundamentalism that arises in the United States, which is comparably narrow, hostile, violent, etc. How does it grow? Well, interestingly, pretty much the same in both places. What happens is the project is cut government provision of services, right? And then create an environment in which the church, the whatever the bastion of the fundamentalism is delivering those services. So in the United States, the way the right has grown so dramatically is not exclusively, but largely the cutback of welfare and social programs and daycare and income and even places to congregate, places to socialize and be friends, education. The cutback of all of that leaves people desperate. And the churches, the fundamentalist churches, these massive church institutions now start to deliver it. They start to deliver food, education, after-school programs, daycare, dances, environments where people can meet other people and socialize. And people need all that and want all that perfectly reasonably. So they start to get it from the churches, and then the churches have this audience that's beholden to them and that is dependent upon them, and the ideology follows along. But notice it's premised on delivering something, a better quality of life in the short term. That's what the left needs to learn also. That it isn't enough, it is necessary, especially on the left, where we're trying to make the world better, not to enrich the powerful, right? It is necessary to have an analysis. It is necessary to have a vision. It is necessary to be clear about what you want to get, what you want to achieve, and to work for it. But it is also important that the movement delivers now, that the movement makes people's lives better now, that the movement doesn't leave people so frustrated, so deadened, so depressed that they burn out, which is what your questions are about.
Yes.
And so it's not just on the small scale, like setting up a media institution like Z or South End Press or Znet. It's on the large scale of the movements that we set up. Our movements should be delivering better social lives to people. They should have environments which cause people and allow people to have more friends, not less. To have better emotional relationships, not worse ones. To have better education, to have better access to information, to have supportive environments rather than constantly critical, constantly harping, constantly, chipping away at them, to make people feel better, more confident, more empowered on a large scale. If we could solve that problem, we would be in very good shape in the United States, which is what I know. If you look for over those, let's say those 30 years, those past 3 decades or 4 decades, and you ask how many people have come into the vicinity of the left, how many people have become, at some point, leftist, or have taken courses from leftists, or have been involved with a union, or have been involved with the anti-war movements, vast anti-war movements, or the No Nukes movement, or the women's movement, or the anti-racist movement over these past 40 years? The number is enormous, right? We're talking about very, very, very conservatively, let's say 10 or 15 million people. And that's very, very conservative, hugely conservative, right? So let's say 15 million people. Now you ask yourself, well, where are they, right? Then why aren't those 15 million people, many of whom would have had 30 years of involvement, some of whom 20 years or 10 years, right? Why aren't those people still leftists? If they got into the vicinity of the left, why weren't they drawn more and more strongly? If the left is the good people, with the good goals, and with the good hearts, and caring, then why aren't all those people who come into the vicinity of the left drawn ever more deeply? Why don't they become more committed, more involved? That's the big question for the left. Because if they had, then right now in the United States, we'd not only have those 15 million people, but we'd have the people they would have organized and the people they would have reached. So we'd have 30, 40, 50 million people in the United States who were seriously activist leftists. In other words, we'd be on the verge of massive, fundamental change. And I believe that. I'm not just saying that. So if you ask yourself over the last 40 years, what's the biggest problem of the left? The biggest problem of the left, and I think this is the case, the biggest problem of the left isn't that we can't reach out and talk to people. It's that once we have gotten in the vicinity of people, we don't attract them. We don't hold them. They burn out. They leave. They become, right? That's the biggest problem. And I think the second biggest problem is our vision problem. But overcoming these problems has nothing much to do with what leftists usually focus on, which is, increasing the accuracy of our analysis of the war budget to the 8th decimal place, right? Or something like that. Some kind of detailed analysis. What we need to do is face the fact of our own inadequacies. Our biggest inadequacy is our inability to retain people to the cause, to the project, and ask how we can solve that problem. That's biggest. The next biggest problem, I think, is that people say to us, what do you want? And we say, right? Or we say, we say something that horrifies them. We want socialism, and they think it means we want the Soviet Union, or we want, we don't have answers to the questions that people ask us, and we don't really try to generate them. We don't try to provide them. People want real answers with good reason, and we don't try to do that. That's our second biggest problem, I think. Way behind that is the power of the state, which everybody thinks is our biggest problem, or the power of the police, or even the power of the media, right? Of course those things are real, but they're just facts, right? The big problems that we can do something about are our own inadequacies, and that's what we should focus on.